funny how quickly the room changes when the truth finally becomes impossible to ignore. Yesterday, they were listening to the loudest voice, believing the easiest story, nodding along because it was comfortable. And you were standing there knowing there was more to the story, but nobody wanted to hear it. Now look at them. Suddenly people are asking questions. Suddenly they're remembering details they ignored before. Suddenly the same people who doubted you are saying, "Maybe we judged too quickly." Oh, that's adorable. But here's the thing. You don't need to celebrate their change of heart. You don't need to point at everyone and scream, "I told you so." Let them discover the truth at their own speed. Your job was never to win a popularity contest. Your job was to remain honest when being honest was inconvenient. Maybe you were misunderstood. Maybe someone told a version of the story that made you look guilty, while leaving out everything that complicated their narrative. And maybe you spent too much time trying to convince people who had already decided what they wanted to believe. That's exhausting. Eventually, you learn that facts don't need you to chase every rumor. Time has a strange habit of exposing inconsistencies all by itself. People notice patterns. They notice who keeps changing their story. They notice who behaves differently when there's something to gain. They notice who stays consistent when nobody is watching. And when those pieces finally connect, suddenly you're not the person everyone needs to defend. You're simply the person whose actions finally make sense. But don't become addicted to being vindicated. That's another trap. If your happiness depends on everyone admitting they were wrong, then you're still letting them control you. Take the truth, take the lesson, and keep moving. Let people apologize if they want to. Let them change their minds. Let them finally understand what you couldn't force them to understand before. You don't need revenge when reality is already doing the explaining for you. And perhaps the most powerful part is that you don't have to become cruel just because people were unfair to you. You can accept their support without turning it into an excuse to attack someone else. You can appreciate being understood without becoming obsessed with proving someone guilty. You can stand in the truth without needing to turn it into a weapon, while the people who once doubted you slowly realize that the person they judged was never as easy to define as the story they were given. And now that the noise is fading, the only thing left for you to decide is what kind of person you're going to be when the world finally stops misunderstanding you. Funny how truth works. You can bury it under rumors, half-truths, accusations, carefully edited stories, and a whole performance designed to make one person look guilty. But eventually reality gets tired of playing hide and seek. People start noticing the little details that didn't fit. They remember conversations differently. They compare what was said with what actually happened. They notice who stayed consistent and who kept changing the story whenever the room changed. And suddenly the version of events everyone accepted without questioning starts developing cracks. That's when you realize you never needed to chase every person who misunderstood you. You didn't need to stand in the middle of the room screaming your innocence until your voice disappeared. You didn't need to answer every rumor with another explanation. Because when you spend all your energy defending yourself against every accusation, you can accidentally make someone else's story the center of your life. That's a terrible deal. Your life shouldn't become a courtroom where you're permanently standing at the defense table while strangers decide whether you're worthy of being believed. Sometimes you simply keep living honestly and allow your actions to accumulate evidence over time. That's the part people can't easily fake. Anyone can tell a convincing story for an afternoon. Maintaining a false image for months, years, and countless situations becomes much harder. Eventually, behavior starts contradicting the performance. Eventually, the people watching begin asking questions. Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Beautiful. That's the moment the room gets interesting. You don't have to celebrate it. You don't have to point at everyone and shout, "I told you so." In fact, Resisting that temptation can be one of the strongest things you do, because vindication can become addictive. First, you want people to believe you. Then you want them to admit they were wrong. Then you want them to apologize. Then you want everyone else to know exactly what happened. Suddenly, you're spending more time enjoying their realization than building your own future. Don't fall for it. Let the truth be the truth without turning it into your new obsession. If someone changes their opinion of you, that's their journey. If someone apologizes sincerely, you can decide what that means to you. If someone never apologizes, that's information too. You don't have to force closure from people who aren't capable of giving it. The important thing is that you don't allow their previous judgment to become your permanent identity. You know what you experienced. You know the choices you made. You know the mistakes you made too, because real honesty isn't pretending you're perfect. If you were wrong about something, own it. If you made mistakes, learn from them. That actually makes your position stronger, because you aren't defending a fantasy version of yourself. You're standing on reality, and reality doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty. So when people finally start seeing the truth, don't become arrogant. Don't use their support as permission to become cruel. Don't turn their change of heart into an excuse to attack everyone who doubted you. Stay calm. Let them learn. Let them recognize the difference between the story they were given and the person you actually are. Your strongest response may simply be continuing to live with the same integrity you had when nobody believed you. Because if you were only honest when people supported you, that wasn't integrity. Integrity is remaining yourself when the room turns against you, when nobody applauds, when explanations are misunderstood, and when silence would be easier than telling the truth. Then, when the room eventually turns around, you don't have to change your posture. You were already standing where you needed to stand, and while everyone else is still processing what they finally discovered, you can quietly keep moving forward without needing their approval to make the truth real, without needing their applause to make your character valuable, and without turning your vindication into another chain that keeps you emotionally tied to the people who once refused to see what was standing in front of them. You know what's exhausting? Trying to convince people who have already decided they don't want to understand you. You explain one thing, they question another. You clarify the story, they move the goalpost. You answer one accusation, 3 more magically appear. It's almost impressive, like watching someone build a maze and then complain that you can't find the exit. But eventually you learn something valuable. You don't have to convince everyone. Not every opinion deserves a response, and not every misunderstanding deserves your energy. Some people aren't searching for truth. They're searching for confirmation of what they already believe. You could hand them facts wrapped in gold, and they'd still ask why the box isn't made of diamonds. So stop chasing them. Let your actions speak where your words keep getting ignored. If someone believes you're a bad person because of a story they heard, that's unfortunate. But you don't have to spend every waking hour repairing an image you didn't create. You know what you did. You know what you didn't do. You know the mistakes you've made, and you should be honest enough to admit them. That's different from accepting blame for things that aren't yours. There's strength in saying, yes, I made mistakes, without adding, therefore everything they said about me must be true. Nobody is perfect. You don't need to construct some flawless version of yourself just to deserve respect. You need consistency. You need character. You need the patience to let time expose what arguments cannot. And here's where people get themselves into trouble. They become addicted to defending themselves. Every comment becomes a battle. Every rumor becomes an emergency. Every disagreement becomes something they must win. Suddenly they're spending more time explaining their life than actually living it. That's not freedom. That's emotional slavery with better vocabulary. You don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's simply refusing to participate in a conversation that was designed to drain you. Let people talk. Let them misunderstand. Let them create their little theories. If their opinions have no meaningful effect on your life, why are you carrying them around like unpaid bills? Put them down. Your energy belongs somewhere else. It belongs to your work, your growth, your relationships, your health, your goals, your future. And when someone genuinely wants to understand, you'll notice the difference. They ask questions instead of making accusations. They listen instead of waiting for their turn to attack. They consider new information instead of twisting it. Those people are worth explaining yourself to. Everyone else can remain outside the explanation department. You don't owe the entire world a detailed biography of your intentions. Sometimes people will only understand you after they watch your actions long enough. Let them watch. Let consistency do the talking. If you're building something, keep building. If you're changing, keep changing. If you're becoming more disciplined, keep showing up. Eventually, the results become difficult to argue with. And if somebody still refuses to believe you after seeing the evidence, that's okay too. Their refusal doesn't make the evidence disappear. You don't need universal approval to live honestly. You need enough self-respect to stop begging for it. Because the moment you stop trying to convince everyone, you recover something far more valuable than their agreement, your attention, your time, your peace, and the freedom to focus on becoming the person you said you wanted to become. While the people who once demanded endless explanations slowly realize that you aren't running around trying to win their approval anymore. You're simply living your life with enough consistency that eventually the truth becomes visible without you having to chase anyone down to point it out, leaving you free to move forward instead of spending another day trying to prove yourself to people who were never interested in listening in the first place. Let people change their minds. Sounds simple, right? Somehow humans have turned it into a national emergency. Someone misunderstands you for 6 months, then finally discovers the truth, and suddenly you're expected to throw a parade because they finally arrived at a conclusion you reached months ago. No, let them catch up. People process information at different speeds. Some need time. Some need evidence. Some need to experience consequences before they understand what you were trying to tell them. That's their journey, not your responsibility. If someone once doubted you and now realizes they were wrong, you don't have to humiliate them for it. You don't have to make them feel stupid. You don't need to remind them every 5 minutes that you were right. You can simply say, "I appreciate you understanding now," and keep moving. That's maturity. And maybe that's harder than revenge, because revenge gives your ego something to chew on. It lets you imagine the perfect speech, the perfect comeback, the perfect moment when everyone finally sees the person who doubted you looking embarrassed. Very entertaining, very exhausting, and completely unnecessary. If someone sincerely changes their mind, allow them to. If they apologize, decide whether their apology deserves acceptance. If they don't apologize, you still don't have to chase them. People are allowed to evolve, and you're allowed to decide whether they still belong close to you after evolving. Forgiveness doesn't mean restoring the same level of trust. Understanding doesn't mean forgetting. Acceptance doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means you stop requiring someone else's transformation before you can continue with your own life. That's powerful, because otherwise you're still waiting for them to complete a task before you give yourself permission to move forward. What if they never admit it? What if they never apologize? What if they continue telling their version of the story? Are you going to stay stuck forever waiting for the perfect confession? Of course not. Your life is too valuable for that. Let people believe what they want. Let them change their minds when they're ready. Let them stay confused if they choose. Your responsibility is to remain honest about who you are and what you did. And when people finally recognize your character, Don't let their approval become your new addiction. You don't want to go from, "Why don't they believe me?" to, "Why aren't they praising me enough?" That's the same cage with nicer furniture. Your worth cannot depend on the audience changing its opinion every 5 minutes. You were valuable before they understood you. You were valuable while they doubted you. And you'll still be valuable if one person never changes their mind. That's why you don't need to chase vindication. You can appreciate it when it comes, but you don't need to build your identity around it. Maybe someone who once judged you now respects you. Good. Maybe someone who criticized you now supports you. Fine. Accept the change without becoming dependent on it. And if someone returns with genuine accountability, you can listen without automatically reopening every door. Trust should still be earned through behavior. Words can start the conversation, but consistency determines whether the relationship deserves another chapter. So let people grow at their own pace. Let them discover things without making their discovery your personal victory ceremony. You don't need to punish someone for finally understanding you. Sometimes the strongest response is simply allowing them to become better while you continue becoming better too. Because the moment you stop needing other people to admit they were wrong, you stop giving them control over your emotional freedom, and you become capable of appreciating an apology without needing it, accepting support without depending on it, and moving forward without waiting for every person from your past to finally understand the truth you already learned through experience. While their opinions change behind you and your direction continues ahead, quietly, deliberately, without needing anyone else to approve of the road you're already walking along. Being proven right can feel incredible, especially after you've spent months or years being misunderstood. Suddenly people are looking at you differently. Suddenly the same people who questioned your intentions are defending you. Suddenly someone says, "I always knew there was more to the story." Which is a fascinating sentence considering they absolutely did not say that when you needed them to. And yes, you can enjoy the moment. You're human, but don't become addicted to it. Vindication feels like victory, but if you become dependent on other people's recognition, you've simply exchanged one form of approval for another. First you were desperate for them to believe you. Now you're desperate for them to admit you were right. Same cage, different decoration. Your peace shouldn't require a public announcement that you were innocent. Your confidence shouldn't rise every time someone finally agrees with you. You need something stronger than that. You need the ability to know yourself even when nobody else does. Because there will always be people who misunderstand you. There will always be someone who hears half a story and confidently fills in the other half with imagination. That's life. You can't control every opinion. And you certainly can't chase every person down the street carrying evidence like you're running your own little courtroom. You can only control your response. If people finally understand the truth, accept it calmly. If they apologize sincerely, listen and decide what feels appropriate. If they defend you, appreciate it. But don't turn their support into ammunition against the people who once doubted you. That's where the ego starts whispering dangerous little suggestions. Now it's your turn to embarrass them.
No, that's not strength.
That's simply hurt wearing a crown. You don't need to become cruel because someone treated you unfairly. You don't need to make people suffer because they once made you suffer. You can recognize what happened without becoming obsessed with punishment. And if someone refuses to acknowledge the truth, let them. Their denial doesn't erase reality. You don't have to spend your life knocking on their door demanding that they accept your version of events. Some people would rather protect their pride than admit they were wrong. That's their problem to carry. Your job is to carry your future. That's much more interesting. Put your attention back into your goals. Build something. Improve yourself. Take care of the people who actually support you. Strengthen your character. Become so focused on your direction that the opinions behind you lose their ability to interrupt your progress. Because here's the strange thing about vindication: the more you chase it, the less satisfying it becomes. You get the apology, and then you want another one. You get the recognition, and then you want everyone else to know. You finally hear, "You were right," and suddenly you're asking who else still disagrees. Congratulations, you've turned peace into a scoreboard. Don't do that to yourself. Let being proven right be information, not identity. It can remind you that trusting your observations mattered. It can teach you that patience works. It can show you that consistency eventually speaks louder than rumors. Then take the lesson and keep walking. You don't need to stand in the ashes of an old misunderstanding forever, just because everyone finally noticed the fire. Because your greatest victory isn't watching other people admit they were wrong. It's reaching a point where their admission no longer determines how you feel about yourself, your choices, your character, or the direction of your life. While the people around you finally see what you knew all along, and you quietly realize that you were never waiting for their permission to become whole again. You were waiting for yourself to stop needing their approval in the first place. And once that happens, their applause becomes optional. Their criticism becomes manageable, and their changing opinions become background noise instead of the soundtrack controlling your life, leaving you free to move forward without carrying the burden of proving anything to anyone who once refused to see you clearly. Stay grounded when the room finally turns in your favor. Because this is where people make a very interesting mistake. They survive being misunderstood. They survive the accusations. They survive everyone doubting them. And then the moment people finally recognize the truth, they become obsessed with proving just how wrong everyone else was. Suddenly, every conversation becomes an opportunity to remind people what happened. Every apology becomes evidence. Every supporter becomes another witness. Every person who once doubted you becomes someone you need to defeat. And just like that, the person who escaped the chaos starts carrying the chaos around voluntarily. Brilliant. You fought so hard to get your peace back, only to turn around and hand it away because somebody finally admitted they were wrong. Don't do that. If the room changes, let it change. If people finally see your side, let them see it. If someone defends you, appreciate it. If someone apologizes, listen. But don't allow their reaction to change the person you've worked so hard to become. You don't need to become louder because you're finally being heard. You don't need to become arrogant because you're finally being respected. You don't need to punish people because they eventually realized they misunderstood you. Stay calm. That's the real flex. Anybody can become arrogant when everyone is applauding. The difficult part is staying humble after you've been given the perfect excuse to become bitter. Remember what it felt like when nobody believed you. Remember how exhausting it was to explain yourself. Remember how badly you wanted someone to simply listen. Now that they are listening, don't become the person who refuses to listen to anyone else. That's how cycles continue. You don't break a cycle by becoming better at the same game. You break it by refusing to play. If someone who once judged you genuinely changes, let them. People are capable of learning. If someone remains disrespectful, create distance. You don't have to destroy them. If someone apologizes, you can accept the apology without giving them automatic access to your life again. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. Understanding and reconciliation are not the same thing. You can release resentment while still maintaining boundaries. That's maturity, and maybe some people will expect you to celebrate their realization with a dramatic speech about how they finally discovered your worth. Don't bother. Your worth existed before their opinion changed. You didn't become valuable when they defended you. You were valuable when they doubted you. You were valuable when they misunderstood you. You were valuable when you had nobody standing beside you. Their recognition simply caught up with reality. That's all. So keep your feet on the ground. Keep doing the work. Keep treating people with fairness. Keep correcting yourself when you're wrong. Keep admitting mistakes when they're yours. That's how you remain powerful without becoming poisoned by power. Because the easiest way to lose yourself after being vindicated is to start believing that being right makes you superior. It doesn't. It simply means you were right about something. You're still human. You can still make mistakes. You can still learn. You can still grow. And that's why humility matters even more after the truth comes out. You don't need to become obsessed with the people who finally understand you. Let them understand. Let them change. Let them support you. Then turn your attention back toward your own life, your goals, your peace, your future. Because the real victory isn't standing in the middle of the room, while everyone finally admits they were wrong. The real victory is walking away from that room without needing to hear another word, knowing exactly who you are, knowing what you survived, knowing what you learned, and knowing that your future deserves far more attention than the opinions of people who only recognized your value after the evidence became impossible to ignore. While you continue forward with the same character that carried you when nobody was watching, and the same discipline that kept you moving when nobody was clapping, refusing to let vindication become another distraction from the life you were fighting to build in the first place,